He limped into the war room like a broken shadow still smoldering from hell, smoke curling off the bandaged half of his face, and someone at the end of the table snorted and asked if the cafeteria caught fire. That was the last joke anyone made before Admiral Halleck stood up so fast his chair toppled over, eyes locked on the tattoo barely visible under the man's burned sleeve. His voice cracked through the silence. One word. One name. Reaper. The laughter stopped like a switch had been flipped. The air turned dense, pressurized, as if everyone in the room realized at once they weren't looking at a casualty, they were looking at a ghost. The man didn't flinch. Didn't smile. He just kept walking forward uneven, one boot dragging slightly behind the other, every inch of his movement radiating controlled fury. He passed generals adorned with medals and epaulets, commanders who had never seen a battlefield without a satellite feed, and he didn't acknowledge a single one of them. He stopped at the center of the room, lifted his head, and peeled back the corner of his gauze with 2 fingers. The half of his face still intact was calm, distant. The other half was blistered raw, fresh from a recent burn that hadn't even started scarring yet. No one dared ask what happened. Admiral Halleck swallowed hard and cleared his throat. "State your purpose," he said, though it sounded more like a warning than a question. The burned man's voice rasped, low and graveled. "Your colonies are being hit by precision raids. No survivors. No traces. You're looking in the wrong direction." General Vuro leaned forward with a smirk that hadn't yet caught up with the room's mood. "And you are? Intelligence? Special ops? You look like something that crawled out of a reactor leak." The man's eyes didn't move. "I came here to warn you. They're not mercenaries. Not pirates. They're FOM." That made a few heads turn. Halleck's lips tightened. One of the younger officers blinked. "FOM? The kill unit? Project Silent FOM was decommissioned 10 years ago. They didn't get all of us," the man said. Another general scoffed. "And I suppose you're one of them? Back from the grave, are you?" The man reached into his scorched jacket and tossed something onto the table with a metallic clatter. It was a data spike, military grade, coded to dead ops agents. Halleck picked it up, ran it through a secured reader. His face paled. Name, Reaper. Designation, Silent FOM Unit 09. Status, Kia. Presumed incinerated during the Ferenc 6 incident. Clearance, blackout level Echo. Silence again. This time heavier. Halleck looked up slowly. "Ferenc 6 was a scorched earth betrayal," he muttered. "The entire kill squad was ordered to stand down. We thought you were all. You thought we were dead." Reaper finished for him. "They got most of us. Not me. But they tried." The room felt smaller now. Even Vuro leaned back, the smugness draining from his posture. Someone whispered something about ghosts not bleeding. Someone else reached for a datapad and stopped, realizing they didn't want to draw Reaper's attention. "I trained with those men," Reaper said, taking a breath as if each word was costing him pain. "Bled beside them. I know their tactics. Their patterns. And I know exactly how they've turned what we were into a weapon for hire. They're not just hitting colonies. They're sending a message. And the message is that the Republic can't protect its own." General Vuro finally recovered enough to sneer. "Even if you are who you say you are, what makes you think we'd let a rogue assassin run intel on active territory? You're a liability." Reaper stepped forward once. Just one step, but the kind that made 3 officers subtly shift back in their chairs. "Because I know where they're going next," he said. "And if you don't let me move now, there won't be a next colony. There'll just be wreckage and silence." Halleck exhaled, ran a hand over his stubbled jaw, and tapped the table. "Assuming we believe you. What do you want?" Reaper's answer came without hesitation. "A ship. 3 days. And unrestricted access to Red Sector surveillance logs." That was bold. Possibly insane. Everyone knew Red Sector ran deep scans of black market trade, illegal arms shipments, and off-record military activity. Even the upper brass only saw filtered reports. Granting that level of access to someone presumed dead was political suicide. That's classified beyond top tier, one of the intelligence officers protested. He could leak everything we have on internal movement protocols. If you don't give me access, Reaper said, unblinking, you won't have any internal movement left to protect. Halleck sat back, eyes heavy, as if the weight of a decade of buried missions had just resurfaced all at once. He waved a hand. Get him quarters. Medical if he'll take it. And restrict his access to archives until I verify that spike. Reaper didn't move. You've got less than 72 hours before they strike again. They hit us on patterns. If I'm right, the next target's already marked. Halleck nodded toward a young woman in uniform standing near the back. Lieutenant Rena, escort our guest to holding and run a level 6 authentication on that spike. And for God's sake, get him off his feet before he collapses. Reaper didn't thank anyone. Just turned and followed Rena toward the exit, the soles of his boots scraping quietly against the polished floor. As they left, one of the younger generals muttered under his breath, "If that's really the Reaper, why show up now?" Halleck didn't answer at first. He just watched the scorched figure vanish into the hallway shadows. Then he whispered, like someone speaking an old curse, "Because if he's back, it means we made the wrong enemy 10 years ago." And somewhere deep in the secure sectors of Vyrex Command, a redacted mission file lit up for the first time in a decade. 3 names flagged. 5 colonies listed as destroyed. And 1 line flashing in urgent red text. Project Silent Fawn, asset status, compromised. Reaper, active. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 2 now? The room they gave him wasn't a cell, but it felt like one. Bare walls, a single recessed light, no windows, and a bed that was clearly more for monitoring than rest. Reaper sat on its edge, holding a thin metal cup of water, staring into the surface like it might reflect more than his burned skin. He hadn't slept since landing. Sleep was no longer a friend, it brought back the fire, the screaming, the betrayal. Instead, he waited. For orders. For denial. For the inevitable political red tape that would choke this operation until it was too late. They would waste hours verifying the spike he gave them, cross-checking records that were falsified the moment Fawn was disbanded. They had buried him with the rest. Burned him in silence and filed the ashes. The door hissed and slid open. Rena stepped in, holding a datapad and a quiet expression. She was younger than most in command but sharp-eyed, with the kind of posture that hinted she didn't waste time. She didn't salute him. Didn't flinch. Just walked over and handed him the pad. "I pulled every record I could find on Project Silent Fawn," she said. "Most of them were locked behind Black Echo security. But your spike opened a bypass we can't replicate." He looked at her, finally speaking. "Meaning? Meaning you are who you say you are. And you shouldn't exist." He nodded once and set the pad aside. "Now you understand the problem." She sat across from him without waiting for permission, which earned the first flicker of approval from his ruined face. She leaned forward slightly, her voice low. "I want to know why you're doing this. You survived being burned alive, betrayed by your own chain of command, and now you just show up out of nowhere offering to save the people who left you for dead? Doesn't add up." Reaper didn't respond immediately. He picked up the cup again and took a slow sip, more for the pause than the water. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but weighted. "They didn't just burn me. They burned everyone. Whole families. The operation that went south on Farron 6 wasn't a failure. It was a cleanup. Someone high up decided Fawn knew too much. Too many buried bodies. Too many unsanctioned kills. So they gave the order. Wipe us out. I was on recon when the charges went off. I felt the heat before I heard the screams." Rena watched him, her hands folded in her lap. "And now? Now they're using what we built," he said. "Fawn's tactics, training, our codes. Whoever survived the purge didn't just disappear. They turned mercenary. Someone's funding them. Paying them to do what we did, except now it's for profit. And vengeance." She frowned. "How do you know it's them?" He pulled up his sleeve, exposing the scorched but still visible tattoo burned into the muscle of his forearm. A fawn wrapped in barbed wire, fawn unit's mark. Below it were 4 fresh slashes carved into the skin, barely scabbed over. Each one's a name I've confirmed. Each one used to be my brother in arms. One of them tried to kill me on Drallo's station 6 months ago. Didn't recognize me through the flames. Thought I was just another bounty. Rena exhaled, shaking her head. This is way above my clearance level. I should report this and step out. You won't, he said flatly. She looked up sharply. You think you know what I'll do? I know who helps and who hides. You helped. You access Black Echo logs without clearance. You're not scared of protocol. You're scared of being the only one who believes me. She didn't argue. He stood, his movements slow but deliberate. I need access to Red Sector logs. Now. I already know the hit pattern. Mining World Cargo Relay, Agriculture Colony. They're building supply lines. Testing weak points. The next one's coming fast. They won't authorize that. You're not cleared for anything beyond internal surveillance. They're still debating whether to detain you or deport you to a psychiatric ward. Then give me the access off the record, he said. You've already broken a dozen regulations. One more won't make a difference. She hesitated, lips pressing into a tight line. You're asking me to risk my career, maybe my life, based on a hunch. I'm not asking, he said. I'm telling you what happens if you don't. In 48 hours, the colony on Kelvin 9 goes dark. You'll lose 27,000 people. Half of them kids. I know the man planning it. His name's Ajax. He used to carry a teddy bear in his drop pack for luck. Now he leads a kill squad with no leash. That name did something. Her face changed. Ajax was in a red-level threat report she'd read a week ago, linked to several ghost raids with 0 survivors. No trace. No patterns. No motives. Just destruction. She stood. If I do this, I want something in return. He gave a dry laugh. Thought you were above that. I want in. I don't just pull logs and sit this out. I want to see it. The operation. The people who betrayed you. I want to know what really happened to Fang. He didn't smile, but something in his expression softened for a moment, like a scar remembering warmth. Then suit up, Lieutenant. You're in. 3 hours later, they were aboard an unmarked scout vessel headed toward the outer rings. Rena fed him the decrypted logs in silence, watching as he dissected them like a butcher with muscle memory. He traced heat trails, ion signatures, even shifts in trade reports from old supply lanes. Every detail mattered. Every movement meant something. This wasn't just a mission, it was a vendetta, coded in blood and coordinates. He paused over a single file. A relay beacon, partially corrupted. But it held one phrase embedded in the signal noise. A code only Fang would recognize. Death whispers loudest in the quiet. He leaned back in the pilot's seat, jaw tightening. They're not hiding anymore, he said. Rena looked up from her console. What does that mean? It means they know I'm coming. And they want me to find them. She stared at him, feeling for the first time the full weight of who was sitting beside her. Not just a man. Not a soldier. Something sharper. Burned, broken, but alive for one purpose. To hunt the ghosts that haunted him. Shall I continue with Chapter 3 next? The descent onto Kelvin 9 felt too quiet. From orbit, the colony looked intact. Lights in the outposts, heat signatures in the buildings, but no movement. Not the kind of silence you expected from a settlement that housed 27,000 workers and their families. Rena sat stiffly in the co-pilot seat while Reaper leaned forward, eyes scanning the terrain as if searching for ghosts beneath the soil. The ship creaked slightly from atmospheric pressure, but inside it was dead still. No chatter, no sensor alerts, not even the soft clicks of autopilot adjustments. It was as if the planet itself had stopped breathing. Reaper switched the comms to passive and killed the external beacon. Rena noticed. Won't that trigger a flight violation? If anyone was watching, yes, he muttered. But if someone's already wiped this place, I don't want to broadcast we're next. They landed half a kilometer from the colony perimeter. The dust blew softly across the platform as the ramp lowered. Reyna stepped out behind him, her pulse tapping hard against her ribs. Her boots crunched on gravel, the air dry with the chemical tint of terraforming. The buildings in the distance looked clean, undamaged. That was the first warning sign. If this had been a pirate raid, there'd be broken glass, blast marks, some sign of looting. But this was pristine. Untouched. Like a model colony set up for tourists. It made her skin crawl. Reaper walked without hesitation, weaving through the alleyways between the housing blocks like he'd lived here once. His burned hand brushed the metal walls occasionally, searching for heat, listening for hums, noting patterns. Every detail was being absorbed, measured, weighed. Rena kept her eyes moving, hand close to her sidearm, even though she knew deep down that if something went wrong, her sidearm wouldn't matter. The first body was inside a storage unit. A technician, frozen in place, eyes wide open, body slumped forward against the console. No blood. No visible wounds. Reaper studied him silently, then touched the base of the man's neck. Rena watched as he found a small incision, barely visible, behind the jawline. Puncture mark. Neural spike, Reaper said. Clean and fast. Instant shutdown of voluntary systems. She blinked. I thought that tech was banned galaxy-wide. It is. Except for those who never cared about rules. They moved on. Building after building, the same eerie pattern repeated. Families at dinner tables. Workers at consoles. Frozen in place like statues left by some macabre artist. Everything untouched, unmoved. Reaper's face didn't change, but something in the way he breathed said this wasn't new to him. He had seen it before. Maybe done it before. She didn't ask? They reached the central relay tower near sundown. The sky above Kelvin 9 glowed orange with a thin band of clouds. The horizon looked like fire behind glass. Reaper motioned for her to cover the entrance as he approached the door. It was already ajar. Inside, power still ran. Consoles flickered, data streamed across cracked monitors. But no one was there. He sat at the main console, fingers flying across keys. Rena glanced over his shoulder and saw file after file blink into view, logs of incoming transports, decrypted comm traffic, satellite tracking. But the most recent transmission was what made him stop. A voice recording. Faint, grainy. This is Ajax. Colony secure. All assets neutralized. Preparing extraction route. If Reaper shows, proceed as instructed. Do not engage without confirmation. I want him to see what's left. The file ended. Silence settled like a stone between them. Rena exhaled slowly. He knew you were coming. Reaper nodded once. He's playing his own game. This isn't about contracts anymore. Rena stepped away from the console and looked out the cracked window toward the lifeless colony. So what now? You said there was a list. If Ajax is leading this, who else is on it? He stood up and retrieved a small device from his belt, a holographic slate. It flickered to life, displaying a half-complete grid of names. 5 were grayed out. 2 remained bright red. One of them was Ajax. The other was a name Rena didn't recognize. Wraith, Reaper said quietly. Tactician. Intel extraction specialist. She used to coordinate fauna ops on remote planets. Cold. Efficient. Never left traces. You think she's here too? No, he said. She's in Vyrex command. Rena froze. That's not possible. I would have seen the manifest. There's no Wraith in the system. She wouldn't use that name. She blends in. Disguises, false clearance tags. She always operated inside. She feeds the target's weaknesses from within. Rena's mind raced. You think she infiltrated High Command? I don't think. I know. The attack on Kelvin 9 is a message. The next one isn't going to be a colony. It's command itself. The floor trembled slightly beneath their feet. A dull boom echoed from outside. Reaper rushed to the window and saw smoke billowing from the outskirts of the colony. A ship. Rising fast. He sprinted out with Rena close behind. By the time they reached the ridge, the dropship was already breaking atmosphere. Reaper lifted a compact scope and zoomed in. The insignia on the tail wasn't mercenary. It was Republic Black Ops. Modified. Hidden. But not from him. He lowered the scope. She was here. Watching. They stared up at the sky as the ship vanished into the clouds. Rena turned to him, eyes hard. If she's inside command, what's her play? Reaper didn't answer right away. He stared at the empty sky, his burned jaw twitching slightly. Then he turned toward the ship, walking back toward the relay. She's not after data. She's after a purge. Like Farron 6. Except this time, she wants the whole command burned down. And you? I'm going to stop her. Rena jogged to keep up. We don't have evidence. They won't listen to us. Not with just a name and a hunch. Reaper opened the ship's comms and keyed in a string of codes she didn't recognize. Deep access lines, probably illegal. Then we'll give them evidence, he said. The kind they can't ignore. What are you doing? He activated a subroutine on the ship's console and turned the screen to her. A death list. Every target Ajax and Wraith have hit. Every location. Every anomaly. Cross-mapped with command internal movements over the last 2 years. Her eyes widened. That's black-level access. You'll trip every alarm from here to Vyrex. Good, he said. And just like that, he hit send. Now they would have to listen. Whether they liked it or not. Shall I continue with Chapter 4? The message arrived at Vyrex Command at 0300 hours and detonated like a silent bomb. Reaper's data packet bypassed half a dozen security layers and embedded itself directly into the emergency response archive. The system flagged it as an active threat alert with level red clearance override. No one had ever seen those codes used before, not since the days when Silent Fang missions still had codenames like Ghost Harvest and Iron Sleep. The alert bypassed approval chains, forcing it to display on every senior officer's console simultaneously. It contained names, timestamps, decrypted surveillance footage, and a hunting overlay, the Fang sigil, barbed wire and Fang, burned faintly into each file's bottom right corner. In the war room, the reactions were instant. Admiral Hellick stormed in with a team of aides while General Vero tried to play it down as a prank or sabotage attempt. But one look at the log headers and Hellick knew it wasn't fake. Every kill listed in that file matched a real blackout incident. Each one filed as an unexplained disaster. Each one now tied to Ajax and Wraith. All leading to one inescapable conclusion: Fang wasn't dead. It had metastasized. And one of its deadliest ghosts was already inside their walls. Reaper and Rena docked in Vyrex Hangar Bay 45 minutes later. There was no welcome committee. No guards. The moment their ship was tagged, half the base went into a controlled lockdown. Security feeds flicked between normal operations and armed movement in the lower decks. Hellick had made his decision. He was treating this as a live infiltration, and Reaper wasn't the only shadow walking the halls. They moved quickly, navigating the side corridors Reaper still remembered from his days running Black Ops debriefs. He led Rena through a maintenance conduit that bypassed 3 checkpoints, then into a secure archive room buried under sublevel 6. The place was cold and dark, lit by low blue panels, filled with inactive interface terminals and old holo recorders. It smelled like dust and metal and secrets. Rena stood by while Reaper pulled open a storage panel and removed an old container marked for destruction. Inside was a neural trace board, the kind used to reconstruct pattern data from overlapping tactical logs. He plugged it into the terminal and loaded up the list again. The display shimmered into life, showing intersecting travel logs, comm pings, and power grid fluctuations across multiple secure zones within Vyrex over the last 18 months. And one pattern blinked in bright red, a movement corridor that passed through every critical system room, once per quarter, perfectly timed with access reboots. She's been here a while, Rena said, voice tight. Months. Maybe longer. Reaper didn't respond. He was staring at a name on the screen, one tied to the most recent movement in the pattern. Nyala Varen. Civilian Logistics Officer. Recently reassigned to Command's Special Projects Division. Her profile listed her as mid-30s, orphan from the Trin War, excellent performance evaluations, and a nearly invisible footprint. But her transfer had come from a ghost department that technically didn't exist anymore. One tied to Fang's disbandment records. Wraith, Reaper muttered. That's her alias. You sure? I'm never sure, he said. She doesn't leave fingerprints. But that corridor doesn't lie. Suddenly the room lights cut out. Every panel went dark, then emergency red lighting pulsed to life. A voice echoed from the hallway speakers, calm, professional, chilling. This is internal security. Intrusion detected in archive sublevel 6. All personnel, remain in secure positions. Suspect designation Reaper. Terminate on sight. They'd flipped the system. Reaper was now the target. He moved fast, slamming the trace board back into the crate and hurling it to Rena. Backup route. Get this to Halleck. Don't stop. Don't talk. Don't get caught. What about you? I'll draw them off. That's suicide. No, he said, already stepping into a hallway as red warning lights danced off his scarred skin. That's what they trained me for. Then he was gone, sprinting into the dark corridors as the first wave of automated sentries activated. Rena cursed and dove into a side passage, pulling the crate tight to her chest as doors slammed shut behind her. Overhead, heavy footfalls pounded through the ventilation shafts. She whispered a silent hope that Reaper knew what he was doing, even though every part of her told her no one should survive what was coming. Reaper moved like water through steel, flowing from shadow to shadow, avoiding line of sight with inhuman precision. The sentries weren't Fang, they were standard command response bots, but he trained people to disable them. And more importantly, he trained people to use them as distractions. He tossed a flare down a side hall and vaulted over a service pipe as two sentries chased the signal, leaving his route open. He reached the upper ring of the command tower and slipped into the observation deck. From there, he saw the central briefing chamber through the glass wall, a wide circular space where Halleck, Bureau, and several others were watching the trace data Rena had sent. She made it. He exhaled once. Good. Then he spotted Nyala Varen, standing just behind Bureau, clipboard in hand, posture perfect. Too perfect. She leaned in slightly, whispering something in his ear. Bureau nodded, tapped something on his wrist, and the screen flicked to a different feed, a weapons inventory. She was rerouting targeting protocols. Reaper smashed through the glass. It didn't shatter like it should. The security material splintered in a controlled ripple, creating a perfect gap just large enough for him to leap through. He landed hard, rolled, and drew his blade before anyone could blink. Nyala spun around, dropping the clipboard, eyes widening, but not in surprise. In recognition. Reaper, she breathed. Everyone in the room froze. Halleck raised a hand toward the guards. Stand down. No! Bureau shouted. He's armed, he's... Reaper stepped between them and drove his knife into the wall next to Nyala's head. She's Wraith, he said. Scan her neuroprint. Now. Halleck didn't argue. He gestured to the system techs, who immediately began scanning. Within seconds, Nyala's civilian ID dissolved into raw biometric data, and there it was. Cross-match confirmed, Wraith. Silent Fang Operator Theta 7. Wraith didn't wait. She reached for a hidden blade on her wrist, but Reaper caught her arm mid-motion. The fight that followed wasn't flashy. It was vicious. Elbow strikes, joint locks, close-range combat between two people trained to kill in silence. Wraith was faster, but Reaper was angrier. Stronger. He caught her by the throat and slammed her into the command table, shattering the display. Blood trickled from her mouth as she hissed at him. You think killing me stops anything? You're already too late. Maybe, he said, pressing harder. But at least I'll die on my feet. Halleck shouted for containment. Guards rushed in. Reaper let go, stepping back as Wraith was cuffed and restrained. He didn't speak again. Didn't need to. The look in his eyes said enough. He wasn't here to save face. He was here to bury what should have stayed buried. And now only one name remained. Ajax. Shall I continue with Chapter 5? The air aboard the assault transport was too clean. Reaper sat in the jump seat by the door, head bowed, helmet resting beside his boot, eyes closed like a man preparing for execution, not war. Across from him, Rena checked her gear in silence, but she kept glancing up at him, not nervously, not afraid, but like someone watching a storm build behind a cracked wall. The others in the strike team didn't speak to him. They knew who he was now. The data logs, the records, the Wraith takedown, it all spread across command like wildfire. Every corridor echoed with a name that had once been erased from existence. Reaper. The operative burned alive and returned. The executioner hunting his own. The mission was unofficial. No military insignia, no call signs, no traceable authorizations. Just a clean insertion to the Black Ring facility, a decommissioned refinery station orbiting a dead moon, now serving as Ajax's stronghold. The last name on Reaper's list. The only one who hadn't tried to run. He wanted Reaper to come. That alone made this final confrontation worse than the others. Ajax knew him too well. They had trained side by side. Killed together. And when the purge happened, it was Ajax who gave the order to seal the blast doors. Reaper remembered his voice clearly through the comms. Cold. Dutiful. This is how it ends, brother. But Reaper didn't die. The ship docked with a hiss, clamping to the rotating ring of the station. Red emergency lighting pulsed through the docking corridor, a sign that Ajax already knew they were here. That was the other thing about Fong veterans, none of them hid. They waited. They set traps, laid layers of manipulation, and waited to pull the trigger until you were already inside the kill box. The strike team fanned out through the docking bay. Reaper didn't speak to them. He moved ahead of them like a wraith himself, scanning for environmental cues, traps, body heat. The station was abandoned in appearance. No guards, no resistance. Just open halls, clean metal, and a low mechanical hum like something alive breathing through steel lungs. Rena followed just behind him, scanning access logs, whispering positions to the team. 10 minutes in, they hit the first message. It wasn't a threat or a warning. It was a recording, echoing through the station's PA system in Ajax's unmistakable voice. You're late, brother. I was beginning to think you'd burn for real. But then again, we both know how hard you are to kill. The voice faded. Rena looked to Reaper, but he didn't slow down. If anything, he moved faster. They reached the central command platform 30 minutes later. The doors were open. Reaper walked in first. The room was vast, surrounded by panoramic glass that showed nothing but the spinning darkness of the dead moon below. A single chair sat in the center. An Ajax stood beside it, arms folded behind his back, dressed in combat blacks with a faint gleam of augmentations visible under his neck. A datapad blinked in his left hand. He didn't turn around. You killed them all, he said calmly. Wraith, Cinder, Harlan. Even Cray. Impressive. You always were thorough. Reaper didn't draw his weapon. You betrayed the squad. Ajax finally turned, his face as calm as a priest's. They betrayed themselves. They didn't adapt. They thought they were soldiers. I knew we were products. And when the Republic decided to toss us in the furnace, I chose not to melt. Reaper took a step forward. So you sold out. Took the training and turned it on civilians. Collateral, Ajax said with a shrug. We were made to do one thing. Kill efficiently. You think they were ever going to let that loose in peacetime? We had two choices, wait to be buried, or build something of our own. You built a death market. I built freedom, Ajax snapped, his voice cracking slightly. A place where Fong meant something. Where no one could erase us again. Reaper's silence was sharp. Ajax exhaled and nodded to a console. I knew you'd come. So I made it simple. One shot. You and me. No tricks. No bombs. No army. If you win, the data wipes. My network burns. It ends. Rena's voice hissed over Reaper's calm. Don't trust him. He's got 6 overlapping defense protocols in this room alone. I know, Reaper whispered. Ajax stepped away from the chair and drew a single blade from his back holster. The same blade he'd carried since Farron 6. We trained together. It should end together. Reaper reached for his knife. Burned fingers wrapped the grip like they'd never let go. They moved. What followed was not graceful. Not cinematic. It was brutal. Fast. Real. 2 men who had memorized each other's movements, trying to erase them one strike at a time. Blade to blade, elbow to rib, boot to throat. Ajax struck with the speed of a man-half machine, but Reaper moved with something else, something colder. The memory of fire. Of betrayal. Of screams echoing in sealed chambers. Every strike he threw was a refusal to die. Ajax landed a slash across Reaper's chest, tearing open cloth and skin. Reaper countered with a headbutt that broke Ajax's nose. Blood flew. Ajax laughed, even as his teeth went red. You never learned when to quit. And you never learned when to stop talking. Reaper drove his blade low and twisted. Ajax dropped. He hit the floor gasping, eyes wide, the last of the fire fading from his augmented limbs. Reaper knelt beside him, pressing a hand to the wound. Not to stop the bleeding, but to feel it. To know it was real. Ajax tried to speak. Reaper leaned in close. This is how it ends. He stood, turned to the console, and keyed in the code Wraith had used at Vyrex. The moment it recognized his biometrics, the screen flashed red. Erasure began. All nodes. All kill lists. All funding chains. In 20 seconds Ajax's empire would be dust. Behind him, Ajax's breath rattled once more and stopped. When the console finished, Reaper turned to the shattered window. Rena stood there, watching him. She didn't say anything. She just nodded once. He limped past her toward the exit. No victory speech. No final words. Only the sound of bootsteps fading down a steel hallway. Later, Command would declare the network dismantled. The threat neutralized. The files sealed again. But some stories don't end with medals or graves. Some walk out the other side, still scarred, still alive. And somewhere in the outer rim, a burned man with no name whispered into the wind. No tomb. No medals. Just the job. Would you like a news story outline next, or a thumbnail prompt based on this one?